This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 351, entitled The Masculist Social Re-Engineering of Women. Description. This flyer expresses the desire of the Masculists to socially re-engineer women to make them much nicer towards men. Monoconscious feminazis are repulsive to men, so are ignored by men who find them unattractive. Men have considerable power, financial, scientific, ideological, moral, to force women to be nicer to men, to become nurturative FIPs, by voting with men to menfair the gender laws, or be forced by men to remain babyless, due to so many men rejecting marriage and paternity, due to the hated hypocrisy of the fluffie feminists. Lost my place. In the divorce courts. Masculists need to crush the insufferable arrogance of monoconscious feminazis, who feel themselves morally superior to men, as well as being men's intellectual equals. Both are myths that masculist scientists need to crush by presenting the facts. Masculists want women to be nurturative FIPs. We men have the power to force women to become like that by being socially re-engineered to be like that. The flyer itself. The Masculist Social Re-Engineering of Women by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. The more I observe Oz women in the tram, the more I think that something is wrong. These women are not attractive to men and don't try to be attractive to men. 40% of them are obese and hence sexually repulsive to men, and 3/4 of women are either fat or obese and hence are not sexually attractive to men. It's as though they have wiped their hands of men and don't bother caring about their level of attractiveness in men's eyes, and then wonder why men are deserting them in their hundreds of millions in Western countries. These women have been feministed. They have imbibed feminist ideas that men oppress women, that men have toxic personalities, that men abuse and mistreat women, so should be handled with suspicion by women. These women know nothing about masculism, so have not had their feminist myths shut down by masculist ideas, particularly by masculist science ideas, so live their lives in the comforting but misguided belief that women's abilities are equal to men's, that women are the morally superior sex, because it is women who are the victims of men, so that it is men who are the oppressors, and hence the morally inferior sex. These feminist attitudes are deeply ingrained in the women I see in the tram. Their attitudes towards men are written all over their faces, which is easy to see for me, since I observe them as a cultural anthropologist, that is, as a 7-country multi, that is, someone who has lived in 7 different countries. So given my age, that is an average of a decade per country. I look on Oz women as strangers, as foreigners to me, since I have lived half a century outside Oz, where I grew up, and returned, Rip Van Winkle style, to a foreign land, where things have changed greatly compared to what I was used to as a young man. Now, speaking as a masculist, I'm convinced that both sexes are currently suffering under this feministic regime. Monoconscious feminism, that is, only having had one's feminist consciousness raised and not one's masculist consciousness raised as well, has turned women into surly, unlikable, misandrous feminazis that men avoid, because such women are repulsive to men, who vote with their feet by avoiding such women, forcing them to rot on the shelf. These feminazis, especially if they are also fat fours, as so many feminists are, then feel bitter that no man will date them, let alone marry them and give them babies. Many of these fat four feminists are not very bright, so rather unintelligently believe feminazi doctrine that men are responsible for all their female woes, so it's okay for fat four feminazis to hate men, an attitude that merely tightens a vicious circle that such women are too stupid to pull themselves out of. But the cavalry is at hand, in the form of the Masculist movement. Men have the power, both ideological and financial, to force women to be nicer, both to men and indirectly to themselves. Masculists aim to change society in many basic ways. The primary political goal of the Masculists is to create a FIP society, that is, one in which all adults are FIPs, financially independent persons, who have been socialized by parents and educated by teachers and professors to get a career-competent education at high school and college, so that both sexes, especially young women, can be responsible, fit adults and not be fluffies, that is, traditional women who expect to parasite off the labour and money of a man. Fluffies are vermin to Masculists. Fluffies are the enemy to the Masculists, to be wiped out, seen by Masculists the way abolitionists saw slavers of Negroes in the 1800s in the US. The aim of the abolitionists was to free the Negroes from slavery. The aim of the Masculists is to free men from manslavery, a hugely bigger problem given the respective sizes of the populations of Negro slaves to man slaves, that is nearly half the population, that is the male half. We men have considerable power over women to force women to grow up, to FIP up, and to become much nicer to men. This power takes various forms, for example, financial, intellectual, biological, moral. Our financial power over women is that nearly all men are FIPs. We men are raised to be FIPs, and in a manner of speaking, we evolved to be FIPs. We men have the power to wipe out fluffies if we choose to, merely by refusing to be manslaved by them, forcing them to rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and spat at for being manslaving, parasitic vermin. 2/3 of men in many Western countries now are so conscious of the toxicity of the divorce courts, taken over by the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites, that these men have wiped their hands of marriage, made too toxic by these misandrous feminazis in all their hypocrisy, behaving as feminists, that is, pushing for equal rights with men in the parliaments, but behaving as fluffy parasites in the divorce courts, financially massacring one married father in 4, treating such men as cash machines to be abused and robbed. Such feminazis are truly hated by the Masculists, and if a sex war comes, they'll be murdered in large numbers, because our current Western countries cannot survive when one father in 4 has his life ruined by these feminazi vermin in the divorce courts. These masculisted men, who have had their masculist consciousness raised, have decided to wipe their hands of marriage and reject paternity. Since we men are FIPs, we don't need women to parasite off in a situation in which women earn the money and we men spend it, as was the case in earlier generations, except with the two gender roles reversed. A fluffy can only be a fluffy if she's able to get her financial claws into some gullible, manslavable idiot male who knows nothing about masculism, who has been brainwashed all his life that his function is to be a manslave to a parasiting female. Most women have a very deeply ingrained attitude that men exist on this earth to pay for women to have babies. Masculists have the power to crush this attitude simply by refusing to be manslaved by fluffy parasites. Masculists have such a contempt for this attitude that they spit on women who express such attitudes, calling such women manslaving fluffy parasites. Masculists have the power to force women to become bi-conscious by haranguing women with Masculist doctrine, Masculist ideas in the media, in conversations, on the internet, in books, etc. As Masculists and MGTOW, that's men going their own way, an important branch of the men's lib movement, but much less politically active than the Masculists, who are very confrontational and verbally aggressive, close brackets. ideas spread throughout the Western world, women will inevitably be influenced by these ideas and gradually become more bi-conscious. Formerly monoconscious feminazis, who because of their monoconsciousness tended to be feminazi bitchy, will become more bi-conscious, and that will tend to soften their anger against men, because they will learn from the Masculists that women oppress men far worse than vice versa, because women's oppression of men is far deeper, lasting decades, in the form of female financial parasitism, female manslavery, the fluffy feminist hypocrisy in the divorce courts, women's red-pilled nature, that is, that women don't love men unconditionally, but rather love men's sexploitability, so that as soon as her man loses that sexploitability, she evolved to be able to quickly, coldly, disloyally dump him in favour of a more sexploitable manslave. Close brackets. Women's hypogamy, etc. Once large numbers of women become bi-conscious, they will lose their anger bias, their gender bias, because they will stop seeing gender oppression as a one-way street. These bi-conscious women will see gender oppression as being a two-way street and will become much nicer towards and be much more approachable by men as a result, since they will have lost their monoconscious feminazi bitchiness. So masculist groups need to be set up in every university, and especially in every high school, where most of the fluffy crapper damage is done. That is, 3/4 of 16-year-old girls at high schools choose to study fluffy crap. That is the soft option, the intellectually lazy, intellectually easy majors that require only memorization and not abstract thought, as in math and the sciences. Fluffy crappers at high school become fluffy crappers at college because they are excluded from studying STEM, science, tech, engineering and math, and the professions at college because they didn't study them at high school. These fluffy crapper female students then become fluffies in their 30s when their biological clocks start ticking hard and they realise they can't afford to pay for their own middle-class house due to their fluffy crap diploma. So start looking around for some gullible manslavable man to pay for her to raise her babies in a middle-class house that he pays for. As masculinist ideas spread, and as more and more men adopt the MGTOW lifestyle, rejecting marriage, rejecting paternity, then hundreds of millions of women will become babyless. We men have that power to force women to be babyless, since we men have monopoly control of our sperm. Sure, a woman can have a one-night stand at some pub, picking up some trash male to be impregnated by him, but such a strategy will go against women's hypergamous nature. Brackets, that is, wanting to mate up, to get the superior DNA from a superior man for her kids, so that her kids can have superior DNA than she has, which is obviously good for the species, so evolved, creating a hypogamous instinct that all women have. We masculists have the power to force women to vote with men, to menfair the gender laws, especially in the current war zone between the sexes called the divorce court. Divorce law is screaming out for reform. Custody of children after a divorce should be joint by default, so that men are prepared to be fathers again and not have to face a crushing 1 chance in 4 of losing his kids to some fluffy feminist hypocritical divorce court system that has made divorce and hence marriage so toxic, that is such a shitty deal for males, that these feminazi divorce court lawyers and judges have become indirect genociders. Because indirectly they are wiping out whole populations and have to be stopped with bullets if necessary by having responsible males, masculist soldiers, go out into the streets and simply murdering these divorce court genociders. Women need to vote with men to remove other major legal discriminations against men, the most blatant of which is the lack of the paternity rejection right. Women need to be taught by the Masculists that the worst form of sexual discrimination that exists is not against women, but against men, in the form of the lack of a para. Women have the maternity rejection right, aka abortion right. Women have the Women have the legal right to reject an unwanted pregnancy, but men don't have the same right, instead being treated merely as cash machines to pay for women to have babies, to be abused and robbed by women so that women can have the babies that women want, but that men don't want. If women don't vote with men to menfair the gender laws, then we men have the power to force women to continue to be babyless, which will drive women crazy, since their primary biological function, their essential raison d'être, is to grow and raise the next generation. Women need to lose their insufferable arrogance, thinking that women are the intellectual, creative, productive equals of men, when science shows clearly that this is not the case. Masculine scientists need to educate society that women are genetically inferior to men, intellectually, creatively, productively, etc. Everyone should know that women have 10% smaller brains than men, 10 billion fewer neurons, 10% less neural processing capacity. Everyone should know that women lack genius, with their 4 IQ point lower average IQ compared to men, and with a 10% lower IQ variance, that is, women's IQ scores are more bunched up and men's are more spread out over a whole population, millions of people, so that the morons and the genii are males. Since the genii are males, it's to be expected that men have won 99% of the Science Nobel Prizes and virtually all the Abel Prizes and Fields Medals in mathematics. Men have much higher testosterone levels than women, so are a lot more aggressive, ambitious, and persist more at difficult tasks than women, so achieve hugely more. Women invent almost nothing, build almost nothing, create almost nothing. Men have only tolerated women because of women's two traditional monopolies of vagina and womb. But soon, men will be preferring to their sex bots that are appearing on the market now, with their luscious curves, their film star faces, their creamy, grippy vaginas. Men will soon be able to grow their own kids, given that Japanese scientists have already grown a goat in an art womb. That's artificial womb. When men prefer to sex their bots and to grow their own kids, women will be ignored by men in their billions, since men only pretend to be nice to women because men want to penis them. But once women have been replaced by sex bots and art wombs, women's major negative traits such as nagging, their irrationality, their moodiness, their emotionality, their hysterics will be seen as greatly inferior to the increasingly attractive sex bots that will be given increasingly emotionally agreeable and intelligent personalities by the AI, that's artificial intelligence-based sex bot manufacturing companies. When hundreds of millions of men ignore women, preferring their sex bots and to grow their own kids, then women will be forced to be nice to men. Women will be clawing at each other to attract men's dwindling attention. Any woman stupid enough to hold onto old-fashioned feminazi attitudes in a sex-bot art room-dominated world will be the first category of female to be rejected by men. Masculists will apply enormous moral pressure on society, and particularly on women, to become nurturative FIPs. That is, to be nurturative to men, the way these men's mothers were to them when they were small. Women evolved to be nurturers, so can do a fine job of it if they are motivated. Masculists want women to be socially re-engineered to become nurturative FIPs, so that they are much nicer to men, so that men get their gender laws men-faired, with women voting with men to achieve that goal. We men have the power, that is financial, intellectual, biological, moral, to socially re-engineer women to be much nicer to men, to become nurturative FIPs, the kind of women that Masculists would like to have relationships with, which would benefit both sexes and ultimately stop humanity from wiping itself out. Under the current monoconscious feminazi doctrine, the two sexes are being strongly polarized and made to be mutually antagonistic and repulsive. Things have to change. We men have the power to do this, and it needs men to be motivated, but it needs men to be motivated by Masculists thinking to get the ball rolling. Cheers, Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com website, profhugodegaris.wordpress.com, brackets, contains links to 350 plus YouTube, Minds, BitChute, Masculist essays/videos, and to the freely downloadable book, Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man's Slaves to Women, an e-textbook, 350 plus Masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Ciao.